The other day I was doing some Googling and one thing led to another. I ended up Googling nuclear warhead on Google Images and I came across this beautiful picture right here and I figured why not model this shit for YouTube? We might also be able to sell the models. So I came across this beautiful reference image and when you click on the link underneath this picture it opens up an article about whatever. I didn't read the fucking article, but it tells me the name of this vehicle right here. So if I want to model it now I can look up some more reference images of this exact thing. So this thing is called the RS-24 Yars. If I take that name and I paste it into Google, if I want to look for blueprints, I type in RS-24 Yars blueprint, and that leads me to this picture right here, which is a good background reference that I can use to get the proportions, the dimensions, and all that. The image is pretty high in resolution, but of course, if you open it up, you got these watermarks right here. If you want to get rid of the watermarks, you have to pay for this image from this website called vectortemplates.com. Do not use watermarkremover.io because that would make you a fucking criminal. So once you purchase the blueprint from that website, now in Blender, you can just go to side view or front view or whatever. And with Shift A, you're going to go to image reference over here. Find the image on your computer in your downloads folder or whatever and just load it into your scene. And now if we just throw this into the background, now it's going to help us model this correctly. Now when you load in a reference image like this, it's a little bit too bright. So what I like to do is go down here to this little menu, check opacity, reduce the opacity to something like 0.5. And now when I have to look at this for 20 hours, it's not going to burn my eyes as much. So that's a little bit better. And before we start modeling, we have to get a few more reference images so they can help us get all the details right. And before you start gathering reference images, go to Google, type in PureRef. You're going to download this little program right here. It's completely for free. You just got to put in 0 down here and then you can download it. And when you open that program up, it's going to give you this little blank canvas where you can now copy and paste images. So if you copy an image from Google, you paste it into here. Now you can just keep this window open. You can throw it on your second monitor. You can just put it in the corner so you can look at this image as you go. So get a couple of images of what you're trying to model. For me, this is going to be good for now because right now we're just going to model this cabin here. But later on, we're going to be getting more pictures. So we're just going to leave this in the corner for now. And now that we have a reference image set up, now we can start modeling. So let's figure out where we're going to start. Now the problem is that when you look at a model like this, it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed because there's so much shit going on. You don't know where to start. And people tend to use this shit as an excuse to not do anything and just end up procrastinating, jerking off or whatever. But here's the trick. What you do is you just close your fucking eyes, you pick a random part on this object, and it doesn't fucking matter. You just start modeling that, whatever it is. I don't suffer from these problems, so I'm just gonna pick the cabin first because it looks pretty cool. So let's see how we're gonna do that. Let's start with making this surface over here in the front where we got a window. I don't know if this is the driver or the other guy. That's going to be over here on this side of the model. So let's place the 3D cursor over here, and with Shift A, we're going to add a mesh plane, but we only want to have a vertex for now because we want to trace this shape right here from the side, and then we're going to extrude it to give it some width. So I'm going to select the geometry, press X, collapse edges and faces, and then extrude it to the side like this, then extrude it down on the Z axis. We got this extra little edge sticking out over here, so we're going to push it a little bit further out, but just follow the blueprint until we get down here to the bottom. After that, we can go up. Now notice how there's a difference between the two windshields. The one over there on the left side where the steering wheel is located is angled, and this one over here on the other side seems to be flat or straight. Now my blueprint doesn't show me the other side, so I can't really trace that, but for now let's just do this one, which is at an angle. So let's extrude this up to here. And now once we got this line over here, now we have to switch to front view, but we don't have a reference for front view. So we have to take this image right here. We're going to rotate it by, what's that, minus 90 degrees around the Z axis. We're going to move it to the back over there so that when we go to front view, we have this geometry aligned with the blueprint, and we can just continue modeling and getting all the other details down. So for example, in this case, you can see we got this angle here. So I'm going to add a loop cut to this top edge, place the vertex here, and push this inwards on the Y axis. So now we got this angle. Now we can extrude it over to the other side where we can do the same thing. So I'm going to duplicate this vertex over here from the other side. I'm going to connect that with this part. And the reason I'm taking this vertex is because I want to keep the angle. So once again, I'm going to take this vertex from the other corner. I'm going to align that with this point right here using my 3D cursor. Well, we don't have to align it. We just got to push it a little bit further back like this. And then the lower part here should be the same on both sides. So we can just take this geometry, bring it over to the other side. And there we go. Now we got the rough outline for this surface. I'm going to take this segment here and this one over here, W bridge edge loops, and this thing up here I'm also going to fill with an N-gon because I'm not worried about my topology here. This is supposed to be a game model. And then once we got this shape in the front, now we just take some geometry from the top, we extrude that backwards to this point. Let's also take care of the shape down here at the bottom. We got to trace this part with the edge at the bottom. Over here, let's add a loop cut so we can take these vertices, extrude them up a little bit, delete this edge at the bottom. Then we continue going back, and at this point we have to duplicate this little thing that we created over here. So let's also mirror that across the 3D cursor. And then once we get to the back, back, we got this angle right here. We extrude that, we connect everything up here, and then we can just fill the sides in. We're probably gonna have to use a couple more n-gons, and that gives us the block out shape that we're supposed to have for the cabin for the driver. Now this cabin's got a bunch of different details, so now we have to decide which detail we're going to create next. And again, it doesn't really make sense to contemplate this too much. You can make whatever you want. You just pick something and you do it. For example, let's pick this thing over here in the front. This is some kind of an air ventilation or intake system or whatever it is. And by the way, in the reference image, it looks like we have to push this windshield further backwards like this. And now if you look at this panel right here, it looks like there's a shape cut into this object, and then we have the panel fitted into that hole. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to add a cube. We're going to scale that cube down, scale it up a little bit on the y-axis. Let's say it's going to be something like this. Maybe we can even see this in a reference image. There we go. And we're going to use this cube to cut out the shape that we're supposed to have here. So we have to take the edges from the corners. We're going to bevel them with Control B. They're supposed to be beveled like this. And then we select the object underneath. We go to Add Modifier, Generate Boolean Modifier. We target this block, apply the modifier, get rid of the block. And now we have this hole cut into the surface. We can now use the face from the bottom to extrude the rest of the panel. So you take the face, you inset it, you extrude it outwards a little bit, then you inset it again and you extrude it inwards, then you inset it again and you extrude it outwards. Then once we extrude it outwards, we inset it just a little bit again, so we can take this edge segment and slide it inwards with double G. And this part we're gonna bevel just to make the shading a little bit nicer. So now once we have that, now we have to create these grills here, and here's how you're gonna do that. By the way guys, Blender can crash on you at any moment, and that shit's gonna hurt more than a nuclear bomb dropping on your hometown. So make sure to save this file after you've made a little bit of progress. So I'm gonna save mine now. And now to make these grills, first we have to shape the holes. So I'm gonna go Shift A, add another cube. We can't really see this in the blueprint, but we have 4 grills here, and they're supposed to be approximately this thick, let's say maybe a little bit thinner. So you want to make one long cube like this, where you're going to take the edges at the tops and you're going to bevel them, and that's going to be the shape of one of the holes here on this grill. And then once we have one, we go to Add Modifier, Generate, we add an Array Modifier. We set the factor here to minus, let's say 1.2 on the z-axis, and then apply that modifier, and we're going to have to use another Boolean modifier on the surface underneath, which is going to target these grills. And then once we apply the second Boolean modifier, now we got some more holes here. So these holes are now gonna help us create the covers. And to create those, let's first take the faces from the bottom. We're gonna delete the vertices around those faces. And then here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna place the 3D cursor into the corner over here and select the geometry from the top of this hole. And from side view, we're gonna use our Alt-E spin tool. You wanna set the angle here to, let's say, minus 60 degrees, maybe a little bit more. Maybe you wanna use minus 70 or something. And the steps can be, let's say 6. That's gonna be good enough for us. And there we go. Now we have the cover. Now we have to apply the same thing to these bottom holes down here. And to do that, we're going to place the 3D cursor into the corner of this second hole down here. Then select the cover, but make sure that it's separated from the surface underneath. You can do that by taking this edge segment and pressing V to tear it. So when you select this cover, now you want to deselect and reselect this vertex at the end, which might be a little bit hard. So you might want to separate this to new object, because we got 2 vertices in the same place. And now how the fuck do you pick the one that you want? So we separate this by selection, and now it becomes a little bit easier to deselect and reselect this vertex. So it's the active element. You go up here, you change the pivot point to active element, you press Shift D to duplicate, Shift S selection to cursor, keep offset, and then you just do that one more time. This time you can use both of these objects here. Just make sure that this is the active element. So one more time, duplicate, selection to cursor, keep offset, and here we go. Now we got the covers. We can join those covers back into the surface underneath. We can merge our vertices by distance. Let's try object shade auto smooth, and there we go. Now we got the covers. Now there's another panel right next to this one, which we're going to create using the same method that we used to create the first panel. So I'm not going to show you that. We're going to skip that shit in the video. It's going to take too much time, and I think you guys can figure out how to do it yourselves at this point. I'm going to jump forward a little bit, and we're going to move on to making this door here. Now take a look at this door over here on the side. We have to cut a hole for the door, and then we also have to cut these holes over here for the hinges. They're basically fitted into the same hole. And once we cut the hole for the door, then we gotta make the door, and in that door we have to cut another hole for the fucking handle, another hole for the window, and only then we can start attaching little details to the door and the surrounding area. So let's start making the door. I'm gonna place my 3D cursor over here to the corner where I'm gonna add a plane, which I'm going to collapse, then extrude that out to around here somewhere, then extrude this edge down. Once we got the rough shape of the door, now we're going to take everything, Control B to bevel, V to bevel the vertices. And now this is going to be the shape of the door hole, but we're going to use this same object to shape the door itself. So take the surface, inset it just a little bit with I. That's going to create this gap, and then the face on the inside can be used for the actual door. Now let's take the edge loop from the outside. We're going to separate that to a new object with P, and then that edge segment we're going to fill with F. We're going to add a couple of loop guts where we're supposed to have the hinges, and then once we got those vertices created by the loop guts, we're going to bevel them again with Control B and V. That's going to turn them into two vertices, so now we can use those two vertices to define the width of the hinge holes. Okay, so now we got these two edges here. Now we can just extrude them to the side. As you can see on the reference image over here, we have to extrude them once. Then once we extrude them out a little bit, we're going to take the vertices from the corners and we're going to bevel them. Then we're going to extrude them out to over here and scale them down with individual origins over here. We have to bevel these vertices at the ends as well to make them a little bit more round. And then once we got the shape of the hole ready to go, now we're just going to extrude that inwards. Of course, we're going to use a Boolean modifier, so add a Boolean modifier to the surface underneath. Target the door hole object, apply the Boolean modifier, get rid of the door hole object, and then use this other object which we made for the door itself to extrude out the door. So we're going to push that up until around here somewhere until it reaches the surface underneath. Now in this door we have to cut a hole for the handle, so here's the shape of that hole over here. To do that, we're going to add a plane which we're going to align with our view and scale down. Then first extrude the edge of the plane over here to the side like this, and then we're going to take this edge here and extrude it down, scale it down a little bit. So once we got that going for us, now we're going to dissolve this face to turn it into one n-gon and take all the vertices, bevel them with Control B and V. And if we bevel this all the way, now I think this is roughly the shape that we're supposed to have for this hole here. So again, you're going to lift this off the surface a little bit and extrude it into the surface. We're going to use another Boolean modifier on the door and target this shape to cut the hole. And it looks like we have another hole down here at the bottom, so let's do that really quickly as well. I'm going to duplicate an edge from the bottom of the door. I'm going to lift it up to here. It's supposed to be underneath the handle. I think it's supposed to be around here somewhere. So first we extrude that down once, then we extrude it down again. The vertices at the bottom have to be beveled, so this is a round shape. Or maybe before we bevel them, we should push them backwards to place them at an angle like this, and then we can bevel them. And also this edge here needs to be beveled, so it's a smooth transition between the flat surface and the hole. Now we separate this to a new object. We take the object, we extrude it out, and again we use another Boolean modifier which we're going to use to target this object right here. And now we got the last hole ready. Now we're supposed to add this other detail which I can't see, so this is where I'm going to have to start using some more detailed reference images. I'm going to have to find pictures of the fucking door. I'm going to have to see what's going on here. You could try to just guess what this is and try to create something that looks like what we see in the reference image here. But we're going to cross that bridge when we get there. Now let's take care of some of the more important parts here. So I'm going to add the door handle and the hinges. So let's do the handle first. I'll take a vertex from both sides of this hole where we're supposed to have the handle. Those vertices I'm going to extrude outwards like this. I'm going to fill them with F. That creates an edge which connects them. Then I'll just bring them a little bit closer. Take the vertices, bevel them with Control B and V. This is the shape of the handle, so we're going to separate this to new object. In object mode, we go up here to object, convert to curve, and once we convert this to a curve, now we can go down here to curve settings, and in the geometry section we can find depth, and if we increase that, that's going to make this handle a little bit thicker. So once you got the thickness, then you go back to object, convert to mesh, you go to object, shade smooth, and now we got the handle. You probably want to join that into the object of the door. To make the hinges, we're just going to take this face over here from the inside of the hinge hole. We're going to duplicate that face and separate it to a new object, and then with my knife tool I'm going to make a cut here and also over here at the bottom. So same thing, delete these extra vertices at the top and the bottom. We then have to inset this face to create a little bit of distance between the face and the walls on the outside, and then we extrude it out until it reaches the surface like this. Or maybe it would be better to take this edge and bring it a little bit closer, add a loop cut here and bevel it with Control B and V. That's going to allow us to extrude an extra edge over here, and if we do that, now we have this little step where we can create something for the hinge itself. So the way I imagine this is we add a circle which is going to have, let's say, 32 or maybe 24 vertices. We don't need too many. We scale that circle down and we bring it over here so it fits into this little gap. We delete one half of this circle. We fill this half with F. We extrude it to lift it up to here. We extrude this backwards. And then if we have the same thing over here on the underside, we can imagine that we have to run a bolt through these two parts of the hinge. So we can take these two faces, loop tools, bridge them. But this bridge part, we're going to separate by selection, and we're going to use that piece to extrude out the second part of the hinge which is holding the door. Or maybe this is the piece which is supposed to be attached to the surface underneath, and then these two pieces should be used to extrude out the other part of the hinge. So we can take these two faces from the side, we can extrude them outwards just a little bit so they reach the door, and once they reach the door, now we can extrude them a little bit further We take these two faces here from the top and the bottom hinges, and we're going to use loop tools to bridge them. And now we can pretty easily use this to create the rest of the hinge. So we take these faces. I think we might even want to dissolve these edges, which we don't need here because they're just going to be getting in the way of our operation. So then we just want to create the same type of shape we have on the other side, which means we extrude it one more time to reach the end. So we bring it around here somewhere. Then we scale it down on the z-axis. Then we take these two edges and we dissolve them. And then we just want to select and bevel the sharp edges. So Control B to bevel. We want something like this. So there you go. That looks pretty nice. Now if we attach this door to the hinge and we rotate the hinge, the door is going to be functional, so it can even be opened. Of course, we just have to bring everything down to the other side. So we're going to place a 3D cursor between these two gaps. Shift D, duplicate scale to -1 on the z-axis across the 3D cursor. And by the way, since we have these gaps here, I assume there's supposed to be some kind of a nut at the top and the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to place my cursor in the middle of this semicircle, and with Shift A, I'm going to add a 6-sided cylinder. So I'm going to scale that down and then scale it up on the z-axis so it sticks out from the top and the bottom. And I guess this should do the trick now. So let's try mirroring that. Now we got a bolt too, so there we go. The door hinges are ready to go. Let's move on to the next part, which is going to be the windshield. So let's do that next. I'm going to take this face from the front. I'm going to duplicate that and separate it by selection. And then in front view, we're going to use the edges from that surface to shape out the window. So we bring the edges from the sides a little bit closer so they align with the outline of the window and the reference. We don't need this part at the top here, so we can just have a quad. We're going to fill that with F, but we have to push this window a little bit further up. So I'm going to take this edge and slide it up with G and Alt. And then when I slide it up, I'll place the cursor there so I can lift this one up and align it. Also slide this edge up a little bit with G, and then just take everything and bevel it with Control B and V. That's going to give us the rough shape of the windshield. So once we got that going for us, we're going to extrude that inwards. And you guessed it, once again, we're going to use the Boolean modifier on the main body. We're going to target the window, apply the Boolean, get rid of the window. It didn't work properly. I guess it's because we have a hole somewhere. So you can see that when we delete this, something goes wrong. We don't have a hole here. That usually means your normals are fucked up or something is wrong with the object. So you might want to check what happened. I don't know what it is in my case, and I don't feel like diagnosing the issue. So I'm just going to delete the face from the front. And it seems to work pretty well after that. Now we have the hole for the window, but we have to take the face from the bottom. We have to inset it. And when we inset it, that creates this gap where we're also going to have some screws on the middle. But then you're going to inset it one more time. And then this little inner part here is going to be used for the frame for the window. So you extrude that out. And once you extrude that out, now the inside of that is going to be the glass itself. So I guess this surface here is going to be the glass. We can add a glass material to that later. Now let's talk about the screws, because I think they're pretty interesting detail. I want to show you how we're going to lay those screws down to this gap. I'm going to take this face segment from the bottom, duplicate it, separate it by selection, and add a loop cut around it. Delete everything except that loop cut, and then we're going to turn that loop cut into a curve. And once you turn this into a curve, now you can use it with a curve and array modifier. So you just have to create one little screw. Let's add a cylinder with 6 vertices. That's going to give us a hexagonal screw. And if we place that screw in here and we make sure the size is right, and if we also make sure that the origin point of this curve is on the same place as the screw, then we can add a generate array modifier. We're going to set the factor here to, let's say, 5 on the y-axis, then add modifier deform curve, and with the curve modifier we're going to target the curve. And of course, for some fucking reason, when you use the curve modifier, everything just snaps to a totally different location, so you're going to have to rotate something. In this case, we have to change the deform axis from X to Y, and then we have to rotate it by 90 degrees around the y-axis. And then we're going to change the factor here to, let's say, 15. We're going to increase the count until it goes all the way around the window. And there we go. Now we got the screws. So you're going to apply the array modifier, apply the curve modifier, get rid of this curve here. We don't need it anymore, and join the screws with the other object just to keep everything organized. And there you go. Now there's a million other little details which we can talk about here. They're all pretty much going to be the same shit. So I already showed you how to make the door handle. That's going to help us make this handle over here at the top. Maybe we should talk about how we're going to place these little objects onto this angled surface up here. So let's do that next. I'm going to place the 3D cursor onto this surface, and then with Shift A, I'm going to add a plane. Scale that plane down like this. We're going to scale it up a little bit on the y-axis. You can see we have this kind of little shape over here, so we want to make this a little bit longer still. Then extrude it out and just shape whatever you can see here. It looks like we also have to add some of these hexagonal screws here, so let's add some hexagons. And once you got the shape, now you're going to first place the origin point onto the bottom of that object. So you place the 3D cursor there. In object mode, you go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, and then you activate this magnet shit up here. In the snapping menu next to it, you're going to go down to face project, and you're going to check align rotation to target. Now when you do that, you press G to move this object, and as you can see, it's going to take the rotation of the surface underneath the origin point. So that's pretty good because that helps us align it with the surface underneath. Now you want to turn off the magnet thing, you want to disable this face project, you want to go back to increment, also get rid of align rotation to target. And since we did this in object mode, now you can freely move this around time with G and Shift Z, but you have to press Shift G twice to move it along the local Y and X axes at the same time. So we're going to have this bit around here and here. We want 2 of them, and using the same method we're going to populate this surface with little screws. So let's do that one more time. We're going to place 1 little screw over here, and then once we got 1 screw, we're going to add modifier, generate. We're going to add an array modifier. We want to set the factor to, what's that, -5 or -6 on the y-axis, and after that we're going to add another array modifier, and this time we're going to set the x factor to whatever. So in this case it's -6. We want to try and shape a little square here, so let's also increase the count. I think probably we want to use a little bit more space, so let's change this to -7 on both of the array modifiers, and then you apply both the array modifiers. And if you want to get some more screws, then you can just duplicate one of the rows here, move it along the local y-axis like this. I don't want to have a whole 3rd row, so I'm just going to get rid of some of them so I can just have some in the back and some in the front. And if you want to make them smaller, you can just set the pivot point to individual origins and scale them down individually. And there you go. Now we got little screws. Let's see, what do we have to do next? Maybe we should do a side view mirror, so let's talk about that next. Okay, the side view mirror, let's do that next. So first we're going to start with a plane, and we're going to reshape this plane so it looks like the mirror. So we're going to make it long. We're going to add a loop cut here, which we're going to scale up a little bit. Then we're going to bevel that loop cut so it looks like this, so it's a little bit curved on the sides. And then we take the vertices from the corners and we bevel those with Control B and V. And then once we got the rough shape, we're going to select the entire surface, X dissolve faces. That turns everything into just one n-gon. And you're going to extrude this surface up a little bit, then you're going to inset it, then you're going to extrude it down a little bit, and then we're going to extrude it again and scale it inwards like this. Once we bring it to around here somewhere, then we're just going to lift it up a little bit, maybe add another loop gun here, which we're going to lift up. Maybe this is a bad idea. Let's just undo a couple of steps to where we got this geometry, and then we're going to delete all the geometry on the inside, and the outside we're going to fill in with a grid fill. So we go up here to face grid fill. We got to play around with the numbers here a little bit. So in this case it looks like we just have to adjust the span a little bit, and then the offset should work fine. And that's important because that's going to allow us to curve this surface. So we can extrude this surface up a little bit. We can take the outer face segment, extrude it outwards a little bit more, take this face here and extrude it up as well. And now I'm going to delete this face segment on the inside so I can take this surface here and separate it by selection. Once I do that, I'm going to take the vertex from the middle with my proportional editing and with my fall off set to sphere. I'm going to lift the entire surface up a little bit on the z-axis to make this curve, and then once it's a little bit curved, now I can just lower it back down. I have to delete this outer area because instead I'm going to use this to create that outer edge. So I extrude everything down. I take this, I extrude it again with Alt S, I push it outwards, extrude this up a little bit. We're going to take the edges from the outline here and we're going to bevel them, and we're going to do something similar on the underside as well. I'm not sure what this is supposed to look like. This is probably actually supposed to be flat, or maybe it's supposed to be inverted so it's bulging outwards. And of course again we're going to bevel these edges here on the outer edge, so that gives us the big surface where we're supposed to have the mirror out on the other side. So now we have to attach this to the truck, and here's how we're going to do that. We're going to start by adding a little cylinder, and that cylinder is going to have, let's say, 32 or 24 vertices, and then we just extrude that up a little. We scale it down, we extrude it up again, and at this point we're now supposed to extrude a couple of edges from the side here. We're supposed to extrude them outwards to around here, and this is where they attach to another cylinder which is rotated the other way. So we're going to add another cylinder here, and then this cylinder is attached to a rod which attaches this to the body of the truck. So we're going to take this face over here, we're going to scale it to 0, we're going to merge the vertices by distance and then extrude that vertex out, and this is what we're going to use to form the rod. So you want to separate this by selection, you want to extrude it, you want to make sure it reaches the bottom of the mirror here, and then you extrude it again, you bring it towards the other side like this, and you extrude it down again. Then you take these vertices, you bevel them with Control B to make them round. Then again you convert this object into a curve, and once you convert it into a curve, now you can add some thickness down here. And there's another little bit connecting these two pieces. I'm not sure how that works, but I'm just going to take two vertices from this curve from around here somewhere. I'm going to duplicate them, I'm going to lower them down, I'm going to fill them. That's going to create an extra piece here, although it might be a better idea to separate this to a new object, and then we're going to use a slightly lower thickness on this bar. And now there's another piece which connects this to the surface of the truck, so let's try and create that. I'm going to duplicate this circle and I'm going to extrude it to turn it into a cylinder so it looks like this. On this piece we have to delete the back side of this cylinder, and we're going to extrude this until it reaches the side of this other cylinder for the bar that holds the fucking thing. We extrude that up, we lift it up on the z-axis, then we're going to extrude it and use Alt S to give it a little bit of thickness. We're also going to check even offset. Now I kind of fucked up over here because I connected this additional supporting rod into this bar, but it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be separated over here, and it's supposed to be held by something else. So I'm going to push it backwards a little bit. I'm going to place the cursor over here, duplicate this vertex and push it outwards a little bit like this. Then place the cursor on that vertex and use Alt E spin to rotate this around the 3D cursor. And we're going to set the angle here to something like, let's say 65 or 60 or 56 degrees. Then we just align this with the 3D cursor and we extrude it a little bit further down. And now this is a separate object, which we might also want to scale from this point back here. And to connect this, we're going to use 2 extra little pieces which are going to look like triangles. So we go Shift A, circle with 3 vertices to turn it into a triangle. You scale that down, you rotate it around the y-axis. We bring that over here to the surface, and then this point over here has to be beveled so it looks like a circle, and that's the part that's going to be holding this. So we just extrude this outwards a little bit, then we duplicate it, we bring another piece over to this side, then we extrude everything and use Alt S to give it some more thickness. And I don't know if this is what this object looks like at all, but it looks good enough to me, so we're going to roll with this. I'm going to connect everything into this surface down here at the bottom with Control J, and I want to have the origin point of this object at the bottom of this surface here. So first I'll place the 3D cursor there, object set origin to 3D cursor, and now we're going to snap that shit onto this little panel here. So cursor over here, Shift S, selection of cursor, rotate it by -90 degrees around the y-axis, and we just scale it down until it reaches the right size so that the guy driving can see what's going on behind him. And now we just gotta go around this truck and we gotta look at random little things on this cabin which we can create next. For example, we have this metal bar that goes around the door and the window. And to create that, I'm going to take some geometry from the corner of the bevel around this door. So first I'll place my cursor here, then I'll duplicate this vertex and scale it to 0 with the 3D cursor here. And then I place my cursor onto that vertex. I take the bevel, I extrude it, I scale it up a little bit. Well, I duplicate it and then I scale it up. I don't want to extrude it, I want to bring it to around here somewhere. Then we extrude that and we scale it up. Then we take this edge and we bring it over here to the front. We want to align it with this vertex over here, and once we align it with that vertex, we also have to bring a vertex to the middle of this circle. So we place our cursor onto that circle so we can use our spin tool, and then we do Alt E spin. While this edge is selected, we set the angle to, let's say, -90 or something, and we control click down here to extrude it down to the bottom so it runs along the window. Then we take this face, we separate it by selection, we extrude it out just a little bit. We take the edges from the sides, we bevel them. Make sure that before you bevel them, you correct your normals, because otherwise you're gonna see some crazy shit like this. So you gotta select everything, Shift N to recalculate normals, and then you bevel the edges and you got this nice little curve here. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to make this. It only takes a couple of minutes per detail, but there's a million different details and you're gonna have the patience to do this shit. I think most of you guys watching, you're able to create this kind of stuff, especially if you don't pay attention to the topology too much, which we're not doing in this case. You just have to have the patience to grind through all the little different fucking details, and you gotta find some extra pictures. You gotta figure out how everything is put together. It's really not that difficult. You just gotta be sitting here all day for a couple of days to make all these details correctly. So right now I had enough of sitting here and looking at this fucking truck, so I'm gonna cut this episode here. I don't know if you guys enjoy watching me create this truck. If you do enjoy watching me model this shit, then let me know in the comments and I can make a few more videos about this. I can make the whole thing on tape if you want. I'm planning to make these headlights down here next, which are gonna be a little bit tricky because we have some objects around here which I can't really understand. So let me know down in the comments what you guys want to see next, and if you want to learn more about my tools and techniques which I'm using in these videos, or if you just want to support the channel, then check out my Blender Masterclass course. It's like 110 videos where I explain every single tool and technique which I ever use in any of my videos or in anything that I ever model. So go check that out. There's a link in the description. Also join our Discord if you want to ask a question or get some feedback on your models and shit like that. That's it. Like the video, subscribe to the fucking channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.